Nightfarers, Roundtable Hold is calling again, and this time it's up to you and 2 friends to push back the Nightlords and bring peace to Limveld. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and this is our review of Elden Ring Nightreign. So here's the headline. Elden Ring Nightreign isn't the perfect game by FromSoft standards. There are parts of it that are janky, weird, and certainly don't subscribe to the modern idea of excellent quality of life features. But through all of those rough edges, it's hard not to become addicted to this game, which at its heart is still Elden Ring. The roguelike nature of the gameplay won't be for everyone, mainly because it's much faster paced, multiplayer dependent, and rewarding in untraditional ways. But there is something special here, and while I can't quite put my finger on it, the fact that I can't stop thinking about my next run the second I shut down the game is as true an indication as any that this game is a ton of fun. First released in 2022, I don't think I need to explain how incredible and popular the original Elden Ring was, and still is to this day. The base game still supports tens of thousands of concurrent players every day, and that's a testament to the game FromSoft has created. Fast forward to 2025 and Elden Ring Nightreign has arrived, and by most measures, it's a completely different game. As I said, Elden Ring Nightreign is a roguelike, and one of the more true-to-form rogue games we've seen in the past few years. As new rogue games have been released, developers have toyed with how the overarching progression systems work, constantly feeding players a buffet of permanent upgrades until they could eventually overpower the content that was previously holding them back. We call those games roguelites because while they're rogue in nature, they're much more forgiving. FromSoft, as you might expect, said, "That's not our style," and thus Nightreign was born. But I do think we're getting ahead of ourselves because if you have no idea what this game actually is, you might be swayed by the name alone, and that could, potentially, be a mistake. In Elden Ring Nightreign, you play as a Nightfarer, champions called to Roundtable Hold, yes, the very same, to defeat the Nightlords, powerful avatars that have invaded the world of Limveld. Each mission, called an expedition, starts at Roundtable Hold, and it's there where you'll queue up and form a party of 3. You can, if you're kinda crazy, play this game solo, but it's a bit clunky and not at all the same experience than it would be with other players. Before you reach Limveld, you'll have to pick from one of 8 characters, and like most rogue games that adopt this type of system, each character has a unique loadout which makes them more inclined to a particular playstyle. The Wilder is your all-around warrior that has a lot of versatility with weapons, but less access to magic. The Iron Eye is your ranged damage dealer that can hang back and provide some overwatch for your team. The Guardian is a frontline warrior that can withstand a ton of damage, protect their teammates, and sustain themselves in a battle. The Duchess is an extremely mobile option that acts as a force multiplier for overall team damage, while also bringing support through invisibility. The Raider is a brute that deals more damage by taking damage and can power through hits. The Recluse is a complex caster that has one of the more challenging systems in the game, but also rewarding mechanics to master. The Revenant is a pure support character that can heal, summon, and provide utility to the team. And the Executor is more suited for one-on-one encounters with massive damage potential and an emphasis on his class ability, Cursed Sword. Each character has access to a passive ability which grants them some advantage just by the nature of picking the character, but they also come with both a character skill and ultimate art. These are active abilities that complement your gear loadout and truly make your character unique. As a trio, myself, Livid, and our buddy Tragic spent the most time on the Iron Eye, Guardian, and Duchess respectively, and you'll see those 3 perspectives throughout this review, because while you can switch to different characters between expeditions, there's an element of familiarity you need to achieve with the class mechanics before you can really unlock the game and experience it at its fullest. Now, as a trio, we were really thoughtful on how we constructed our team because there is some semblance of balance that we thought was important to maintain. Of course, truly great Elden Ring and Souls players will make any combination of the 8 characters work, but in our case, as we were still learning the game, we tried to find that sweet spot between offense and defense, and for the most part, it worked out great. Once you select your characters, your expedition starts, and the way this works is relatively straightforward. As you load into the map, you're dropped into a random part of Limveld, and from there, you have access to the entire map. Where you go and what you choose to do is entirely up to you. Your character, based on your class, starts with the exact same base gear every expedition, and for the next 5 minutes, it'll be up to you to increase your level and acquire the best gear possible to take on the enemies ahead. Scattered across the map are over a dozen different points of interest, each with their own challenges and rewards. Locations like the mines grant you access to smithing stones, important items you'll need to upgrade your weapons, while other locations like Everjails can only be accessed once you obtain a stone sword key, but are also the only point of interest that reward you with 10,000 or 20,000 runes in one fell swoop. How you choose to use your first day, which again lasts roughly 5 minutes, is going to largely come down to the path you think will set you up for success the best. I'll admit that even between the three of us who play games together constantly, there was some disagreement, but that's part of the fun of these squad-based games, trying to work through the human element, balancing the needs and wants of your team on top of the gameplay challenges you are presented with. After those 5 minutes are up, the Night's Tide will begin to encircle a random part of the map. This system parallels that of a battle royale, closing into a designated area, choking off points of interest while also damaging you if you're inside the effect. Like similar games that use this system, it's all about being aware of your surroundings and understanding how to maximize your time with the entire map before you're limited. And while you can certainly survive a few seconds in the night to squeak out one final upgrade or boss kill, you won't last long. Once the night tide settles, you'll have another short window to farm for additional levels and gear, and I want to take this moment to explain exactly how that works. As you explore, you'll come upon Sites of Grace. If you have enough runes, you can simply interact with it and level up, increasing your stats and making you more formidable across the board. Interacting with the Sites of Grace also refresh your flask, which is equally as important. That's the easy part. Gear, however, is a bit trickier, and I'll explain why. As you explore points of interest, you'll come across a wide array of weapons, shields, spells, and consumables. At any time, you can slot up to 6 different weapons and can hold up to 4 consumables, 5 if you purchase a special item from the Spectral Vendor. Not everything from the base game made it into Nightreign, but there's a healthy amount of gear you can scoop up based on your character and playstyle. What can sometimes be tricky is balancing all of the gear that seemingly falls at your feet with the amount of time, or lack thereof, you have to explore, because, let's be clear, the methodical, often laborious pace you can take while playing Elden Ring will not cut it in Nightreign. Every second you're wasting looking at gear is a second you're not exploring, leveling up, or getting better gear, and as I alluded to in the headline, not everyone is going to like that. What I will say though is as you play the game more, the overwhelming nature of gear becomes less of a factor. As an Iron Eye, I knew exactly what weapons and consumables I wanted to track down every run, and that only took me 2 nights to really figure out. Like many other games, there is a learning curve, but in this case, there's also a mentality shift, because it's a game many of you are going to be intimately familiar with, but not at all at the same time. Gear drops are strikingly similar to that of competitive multiplayer games. As you inspect items, you'll notice passive effects, potentially skills, and at a glance, most of the information you might want to know about an item. What can be challenging, at least until you're familiar with the game's items, is exactly how that piece of gear performs and its scaling. I know in one instance, I had dropped Livid a legendary weapon, and while awesome on paper, in that moment, it was very hard to understand all of the ways it was great without additional information. You can access additional details about any piece of gear from your inventory, and if you want even more info, from the visual codex, but that takes time away from exploring. It's a bit clunky, but it's an essential evil you're just gonna have to deal with. Once you've elapsed another few minutes of daytime exploring, the Night's Tide will begin to roll in again. This time it'll constrict the map to just a small area, big enough to be considered a boss arena. Once it reaches that final destination, a boss encounter will begin, first by summoning a wave of tougher, lesser enemies, then with the actual boss fight itself. This can be any number of bosses, but it all depends on the expedition you're currently doing. This boss fight occurs during the first night, and once you complete that, you'll scoop up some gear and the Night's Tide will completely reset, triggering the second day. At this point, it's rinse and repeat, and you have the entire map to explore again, going through the process of maximizing your time within Limveld until eventually the second night comes and you have to fight another boss. Once you defeat the second boss, you'll be transported to the Spirit Shelter, which is another place entirely and the staging area ahead of the final boss fight, and the whole reason you're on your expedition. There's not much here, other than a Site of Grace, a Spectral Vendor which sells from a limited supply, and a place to upgrade your gear. It's not meant to be anything more than a place to catch your breath before the final challenge. Once you head through the double doors at the end of the path, you'll be teleported to a new arena, and this is where the expedition boss fight takes place. You most likely know what to expect when fighting a FromSoft boss, but what's most interesting about these fights is the new strategies that help define Nightreign as its own thing, apart from Elden Ring. For example, the first boss, Gladius, has an ability that splits him into 3 individual enemies. By splitting up our team and spreading out to the extreme edges of the map, we were giving ourselves the best chance to survive the phase before he eventually merged back into his primary form. Tactics like that don't really exist in the base game, and that creates a new dynamic to the experience that I personally really liked. Whether it's during a boss fight or at any point before, this is a roguelike, and synonymous with the genre is the act of dying. Nightreign, well, they missed the mark spectacularly here. When you die, you're actually just knocked down, and your teammates can revive you if they can attack you enough times. Each time you're knocked down will add 1 more pip to the revive meter, maxing out at 3. Having 2 or 3 pips makes it much harder to revive a teammate, but that compounds by the fact that the target lock and animation jankiness of trying to hit a down teammate is comically bad. Watching Tragic and Livid, both of whom played melee characters, try to get me up was painful because they'd often slip right past me because the attack carried them beyond my body and they couldn't quite lock on to my frame that was stuck on the ground. It wasn't on them, the system is just that bad, and it's something that I really hope gets addressed post-launch. It's a huge annoyance, I want to be clear about that, but it's also not a deal breaker, and you do learn to work around it the best you can. Jank is really an inherent part of this game, and it's clear that FromSoft to a degree is working in a playground they're not entirely comfortable with. One other clear example is with the movement, which has been enhanced even more than it was when Elden Ring was first released. Players now have the ability to surge sprint, which is an even faster dash that uses stamina, but allows for quicker traversal and combat maneuverability. You'll also have access to wall jumping, and this is where the jank comes from. Whether it's a tent, a box, ruins, or a wall, you can double jump and climb over it, but the system is far from smooth, and more often than not, you'll end up having to repeat the same action multiple times just to get over a singular hurdle. This is most noticeable when trying to scale tombstones that act as guided pathways from a lower vantage point to a higher vantage point, and without a doubt, every time we attempted to climb them, we'd run into some sort of temporary hiccup. The system just doesn't have the same level of polish you'd expect of a modern action-adventure game, let alone a FromSoft game, and because running and jumping is such a common and important thing in Nightreign, you feel that jankiness throughout every expedition. When you're not in an expedition, you'll be back in Round Table Hold, and there's a few interesting things for people to explore here, like the sparring area, which lets you mess around with every character and all of the weapons and spells in the game, a nice quality of life feature that I really appreciate given the complexity with looting weapons mid-expedition that I mentioned before. But Nightreign is a roguelike, and as such, the moments between runs are really about the overarching progression that, in theory, pushes you closer to defeating that next boss. Nightreign doesn't really subscribe to that model, at least not in the modern sense. Once a run is complete, either by dying or defeating the expedition boss, you'll receive 2 things, relics and merc. Relics are powerful slottable items that provide your character with unique buffs going into an expedition. These range in color and in rarity, and each has a potential to offer a starkly different set of upgrades from relic to relic. Each character can equip 3 relics at one time, but they have to match certain colors, and that's based on the chalice you have equipped. Once you defeat the first boss, you'll gain access to different chalices from a vendor, which you can use your merc to purchase, but as far as long-term progression goes, that's it. The game is far more traditional in the sense that you're starting as close to square one every expedition as possible, and the developers aren't doing a whole heck of a lot to make you more powerful between runs. Don't get me wrong, there are certain relic effects that can absolutely change your potency, whether that be by boosting a preferable stat or giving you a clear combat advantage, but compared to other roguelike games such as Dead Cells, Darkest Dungeon, or even Hades, the roguelike GOAT, the offering pales in comparison. That doesn't make Nightreign bad, far from it. It just means you're getting a lot less help tackling each of the expedition bosses, which is a hallmark of FromSoft. Very little handholding and a whole lot of get good. Relics, as simple as they are, provide the only tangible improvements going into a new expedition, and once you defeat the first boss, Gladius, an entire lineup of Nightlords becomes available to hunt down. You're gonna need every advantage possible because once the game opens up, you'll have to contend with a system called Shifting Earth. which changes up the traditional layout of the map by adding one new, and might I say, massive element into the mix. The first one you'll most likely run into is called the Crater, and it transplants a massive Mount Gelmir-style area into the map. As far as we know, there are 4 of these shifting Earth scenarios, and as expected, they are all very different. Elden Ring Nightreign is such an enigma of a video game. On one hand, I love everything about it: the predictable 45-minute runs, the frantic race to level up and get optimal loot, and ultimately just returning to the world of Elden Ring. On the other hand, the game frustrates me to no end with simple things that shouldn't be issues but are. The revive system is atrocious for all the wrong reasons. In theory, there's some merit to trying to save your fallen teammates by attacking them, but in practice, and due to the unpredictability of most attacks, there's always a decent chance you miss a few hits, and that's the difference between life and death. On top of that, the new traversal mechanic, specifically the vaulting, is endlessly frustrating. Having to repeat your actions 3, 4, or even 5 times just to make it up something designed to be climbed is single-handedly one of the most annoying things in a game where every second matters. Quite frankly, it's inexcusable. That being said, and with my frustrations out there plain as day, as someone that loves roguelikes and Souls games, Nightreign is right up my alley, but I don't think it's going to be for everyone, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's an influx of players that purchase the game only to return it shortly after. However, I am hopeful that this unlikely pairing of genres might actually go a long way to broadening the horizon for players that might not be dedicated to one genre over the other. Bottom line, I love Elden Ring Nightreign, but it's not a perfect game, and it certainly won't be for everyone, and that's about as simple and straightforward as it gets. Guys, let me know what you think about the game in the comments below, and as always, if you appreciate the work that goes into making these videos, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.